So welcome. It is 9 o'clock on a Tuesday, and this is April 4th. And this is BUSTEC313 Business Presentations. And tonight's focus and this week's focus are the roles of the presenter, presentation organization, and then we also want to talk about presentation methods and format. There are a lot of resources for you this week. So let's just take our time, walk you through. There are a couple points during tonight's presentation and discussion that I will bounce around a little bit in the modules. But again, remember, I am in student view, and even you in student view, when you go to the modules, you can bounce around as well. So the way this is grouped, I have the weekly focus. After the weekly focus and after tonight's recording is complete, I will post the recording under the weekly focus. The next thing is that you will see that we have the presentation roles as a topic tonight, the presentation organization. I talk a little bit about PowerPoint basics, and I've put some kind of fun activities for you here that do not have points related. I want to talk about presentation methods, and once we talk about presentation methods, it begs the question, webinars, teleconferences, video conferencing. So I've broken it down to webinars versus teleconferences. Then we focus on webinars. Then we take video conferencing versus teleconferencing, understanding the difference between as well as the advantages and disadvantages of video conferencing. We also touch on the podcast, and then I have some additional resources and tutorials, and then we have the homework and activities. So before we begin, I do want to address the calendar issue. So you all know spring break is coming up, and I could only imagine everyone is ready for a break as we all are. So the way that this will work is tonight is the 4th. The next online conference would, of course, occur on the 11th, but that is during spring break. So we will not be online again until the next webinar on the 18th. Also making sure you understand this, that also means that the homework for tonight is not due on the 10th, it's due on the 17th. And I know you look at that big chunk of time with a big smile and the little procrastination monster comes out, but I want you to use this time wisely. When we get back, the remaining 4 weeks are going to go incredibly quickly. And of those 4 weeks, it includes a little mini group presentation as well as the individual presentation. So really use that time to rest up and come back and be ready for a very, very strong continuation into the final 4 weeks of the course. Okay, so let's take a look at tonight's information. The theme for tonight is going to be organizational content, okay, organization and content. And the keyword, which I'll explain later, is on demand. And on demand becomes an incredibly key phrase when we talk about business presentations in the availability of the content. So let's have some fun. Okay. Our weekly focus, from there we're going to go to presentation roles. Now there's 2 different pieces of presentation roles I want to talk about. One is going to be about the traditional roles that we play, but the other is going to start off in a very logistical and functional way. Anytime you go to present at a conference or you've been invited to present, often they will invite you, but they also make sure that you understand your role as a presenter. And when it comes to presenting, and this was the Academy of Management, before any or all of us present, you will always get this little handout, just a reminder of why you are presenting. But they have some do's and some don'ts. And I find that many of the do's and the don'ts of the presenter role that are provided are actually very pertinent to you as the student. I'm going to test here. All right. Can you hear me okay? Okay, excellent. I've lost my ability to hear you, so make sure you're using the chat if you need to get my attention. So often presentations can cause a lot of angst when it comes to business and professional presentations because it becomes kind of a lecture and all that good stuff. So this is just a great role and guide for you. And it talks about the purpose of your presentation, the format of the timing, the introduction, the audience interaction, the theory, the methods, the results, and the conclusions. And I want you to use these guidelines, not that they have to be incredibly tight and rigid, but it's a great guideline for you. So these are the do's and the don'ts. So for example, purpose of the presentation, present enough to tell the audience that whatever you're presenting, in this case we are presenting papers, is worth a read and it tells a really good story. And you don't present just a summary of all the sections of the paper because that's really boring. It's the same thing in business presentations where you're going to tell them what you're going to tell them, but you're going to give them detail and story and interest followed by what you expect them to do. So this is just a great guide. All right. Then we start to get into, I'm going to move these just a little out of the way. Then we start getting into the roles that presenters play. And there's one article that was written by a very, very popular speaker. And this had to do with what role will you play? And it's a great summary. And she talks about the role of the facilitator in speaking, or the role of the persuader, or the role of the motivator, or the trainer, or the listener. Then she asks a question, have I left out a role? Well, this is where I want you to do some critical thinking. So in the modules, there's a couple different places where you're going to be talking about the role of the presenter. And one of them in this particular module, I'm going to scroll back up here, is going to be in your discussion this week. And your discussion this week is presentation roles discussion. She does a good job of overview of these particular roles, but here's my question. Is after you have read the article, Presenter Roles, what role do you play? Consider the question at the end. Have I left out a role? Well, in my opinion, she has. So I put, what about the roles of trusted advisor, mobilizer, the seasoned veteran, the visionary, the liaison, the coach, and the technical expert? All of those are also vital roles that we play. And all of those can be incredibly convincing because if we're a trusted advisor, let's say a financial advisor, and I have a trusted background, then I'm engaged. Or a mobilizer. And the mobilizer I always think of is Martin Luther King, just bringing people together. The seasoned veteran, that's the one that's been there, done it, learned, and they do not want you to repeat their mistakes. The visionary are those that really see the world, and I think of Gandhi. The liaison, I often have to play the role of liaison because I'm dealing with a population that, especially when I'm training faculty, that may or may not be open to the ideas of the administration that it's my job to convey. So I'm bridging that gap. Or maybe if you're in the technical field and you do have programming experience and you do have network management experience, but you also have a user experience, and you know that the user sometimes has a very difficult time talking to the technician. So it takes a liaison to understand the roles of both. The coach, the one that is able to motivate, very similar to the motivator that the one article I gave you speaks of. Then there's the technical expert. This could be something as simple as the person who needs to instruct you on how to work a fire extinguisher. but they are a technical expert. So they can walk you through step by step in extreme detail and also include potential scenarios if there are potential problems with the mechanism or what other things have gone wrong with the user. So these are also very engaging roles that I want you to consider. So use the discussion board to respond to all of the following questions. Can you think of any other roles? All of the roles in this article, as well as listed above, what role do you feel you are most comfortable playing in a presentation or leadership role, and why? What role would you feel least comfortable in playing, and why? So that's your discussion for the week, and it's all about presentation roles. And there's another piece to the presentation role this week. When I go back to modules, what I've also done is based your main assignment this week on presentation roles. It's a personal, individual presentation. It's the weekly presentation entitled Presentation Roles. Here are your instructions. This week, I want you to put the pieces together on the topic of a few presentation roles. You've got technical expert, liaison, coach, facilitator, motivator, visionary, seasoned veteran, mobilizer, trusted advisor, or any of the others that were listed in the article. You will create a slideshow based upon your selected presentation role. Please do a little research on your role and even think of a good example. You're going to create slides, also save as PDF, with your name on the first slide in your selected role. So for example, Trusted Advisor by Susie Smith. Then key information about your topic. Define what is advisor, or what is a technical expert, or what is a facilitator. Then identify some of the key characteristics of that role. So for example, technical experts need to have credentials, or what we call credible credentials, or credible intent, or identifiable power and knowledge. Then some examples of some presenter or presentations that would demonstrate that utilized role. So let's say a technical expert comes in to teach in your particular environment how to run a certain piece of software for attendance. Then any other key information you feel that's important to the role, and then of course a closing slide. This presentation, and you're welcome to use any presentation software, whether it be Google Slides or PowerPoint or Prezi, any tool of your choice. If you use Prezi, just make sure you upload the URL, and it's worth 50 points. Please, those of you saving your file, make sure you call it roles. Also put the letter that I have up here. This helps me sort. So if you've chosen technical expert, use A. If you've chosen liaison, use B, etc. The topic, last name. So example, roles _H, mobilizer, Fuller would be an example of a file name. So I've already talked about 2 of the assignments for this week. Susan, great question. You want a minimum of 4 slides, and how I account for that is the title slide and the closing slide would be 2. The 2 pieces of content here are when you have your key role defined, I would strongly recommend that that be on its own slide. However, the key characteristics of the role could absolutely have an example on the slide, as well as any other information. So I would recommend a minimum of 4 slides. Let's go back to the modules. I'm going to leave presentation roles behind, and I'm now going to talk about presentation organization. I've placed some information for you here about organization and preparation tips. This particular author is a great resource when it comes to When it comes to presentations, and he also authored a book called The Zen of Presentation. This is just a great guide. Start with the idea in mind. And in a moment, I'm going to talk to you about idea mapping. Know your audience as well as possible. And once again, much like we've discussed before, questions to ask when it comes to your audience. Content, content, content. Now, he will make sure to mention, although we talk about content, this is not a data dump. Keep it simple. Outlining your content. Have a sound, clear structure. And then again, so what? Why do people care? Can you pass the elevator test where you could create a brief synopsis of your presentation in 30-45 seconds? The art of storytelling, and then confidence in your presentation. Great information and tips for you this week. We then move on to some very, very basic PowerPoint vocabulary. Many of these terms will be familiar to you. It's just making sure that you understand basic terminology, because I will be referring to all of these terms when it comes to feedback on your slides. Then I decided to put something fun. So there are 45 key terms when it comes to slideshows and presentations in PowerPoint. So there are 45 flashcards here for you. The way you work this little flashcards is you'll notice your progress is over here. This is your flashcard, and just like a flashcard, you have a definition on one side and the word on the other. So the PowerPoint view, in which the window is divided into 3 panes, the slide pane, the slides outline pane, and the notes pane, is simply called, and we can flip it, normal view. Next, a presentation page that can contain text, pictures, tables, charts, and other multimedia is a slide. This will take you through all 45 flashcards. Keywords that I would hope you'd be very familiar with when it comes to PowerPoint. We didn't want to stop there, so we decided to have an open terms in the window. So this is how to learn your terms. You can type your answer here based upon what you learned. So a type of chart used to compare data. You simply compare your information. Maybe you decide, we did learn about a column chart. Maybe that's what it was. And it'll go through and it'll mark incorrect and correct. At any point in time, you can say, don't know, and then it will show you the answer. And then you can always copy the answer below and then get the answer right. So once you've looked at the flashcards and you've learned the terms, I want you to challenge yourself with a quiz. So take the test in a new window. So this is a test, and remember, it's not really being scored, it's just for fun. So do your best, use notes, print out anything that I've given you. It has 5 written questions, 5 matching questions, 5 multiple choice questions, and 5 true and false questions. Here's a little hint. If you keep your flashcards open or the list in another screen, you can copy and paste your answers here. Again, there's no real score. I just want you to have fun and learn. The way you're going to learn and be tested on it is when you go down to your homework, there's going to be a quiz at the bottom, which again is open note, open book, open brain. It's a PowerPoint terminology quiz, many of the words you've seen before. And when you take the quiz, it's simply, you will look at the term, you will drop this down, and you will try to find the matching definition. Just a hint, when you go to Modules. Under the PowerPoint Resources, the quiz is based upon the PowerPoint Vocabulary PDF. So you're more than welcome to print this out and use this as a reference when you take your quiz. It's word for word. Did I mention that the key word today, see if I can find it, the key word for today is on demand. Let's go to presentation methods. Presentation methods, I've done a few things for you here. When we talk about presentation methods, there's a traditional 5 methods of presentation and tools that we use. When we talk about webinars and video conferencing, it's simply that's a different way to access the 5 tools. So this little link here is how to give an awesome presentation. This breaks it down, powerful presentation, simply stated. It's maybe a 2 to 3 minute video that's very worth watching. I then have a longer video. This is 17 minutes, and this is how to create an awesome slide deck. There's some great resources here by Pat Flynn about how to create slides that are very, very meaningful and powerful and can impact you in a very unique way. Pay close attention, pause as you need to, and if there are any skills that he demonstrates that you're not familiar with, please let me know and I will post additional videos. This is a PDF of the traditional 5 presentation methods, and you can print this. This is simple comparison. So when we talk about the 5 different presentation methods, there's of course presentation without visuals, there's presentations with a flip chart, there's PowerPoint, and there's presentations with Visualizer or other software, and then there's presentations with both, and this will simply tell you the pros and the cons. Now, please remember that many of these resources, such as this, are trying to sell a product. However, there's some great resource information in here when it comes to who learns and how. Let's talk a little bit about webinar versus teleconferencing. Teleconferencing are live. This particular media provider will make you look at teleconferencing in a very live and dynamic way. Normally when we talk about teleconferencing, it is two-way, and thus it cannot necessarily be on demand, whereas webinars are definitely on demand. The other piece of both teleconferencing and webinar that is key is that we have what's called interactive data. And that's where you use tools such as Poll Anywhere or Data Tracker so that you can see who is engaged at any point in time, because then you can document what slides or pieces of information people reacted to, and that creates more powerful presentations down the road. On demand. Now, when we talk about webinars, there are definitely some secrets to quality webinars. And so what I've done here is GoToWebinar, which is a great tool, has produced a handbook of 18 pages of tips and tricks of how to create a very effective webinar. I provided that handbook for you here. Part 1 starts about building your webinar slide deck and the slides that you'll be presenting. This gets into a key from the main content and how to make the main content much more meaningful. It's great information all the way through the conclusion. Part 2 talks about making your slides more attractive and how we do that. And it talks about effective slide design and adding small graphics and how to build slides on each other. Finally, if you're interested in GoToWebinar, there's a link here about the product. When we talk about how to create a highly, highly effective webinar, These are 14 tips to create a presentation. It's broken down into tips for the webinar, as well as presentation and impactful tips. This is great information. I think you'll find it helpful for those of you who have a webinar in your future. It's very important that you understand webinar services that are available. Some can be quite pricey, but I also want you to be aware of how many products are out there and the different costs. So, things to consider. How many participants will you have? There are some that are free, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but this is some of the most commonly used products as well as their pricing. When you scroll down, we also talk about features, the level of encryption, the ability for it to be friendly, mobile friendly, being able to have multiple rooms and edit recordings, being able to have Outlook integration, so when I send out an invite, it automatically goes in their Outlook calendar, as well as social media interaction. There's also presentation features that are very, very important. Now, once again, anytime you look at something like this, there could be a hidden agenda, so be careful. Top rated here. Just depends on the resources that you need. Of these products, I use AnyMeeting, GoToWebinar. I no longer use Adobe Contact, and Cisco WebEx. Side note, you will notice that ConverZoom is not located on here anywhere. Editorial comment. Okay. Next thing is, these are 19 popular websites that are less expensive and or free. Take a look, see what you think. So I do want you to understand video conferencing and the advantages and disadvantages of video conferencing. So this particular resource that is here for you will go into some great resources when it comes to advantages, but also very honest disadvantages as well. I do want you to understand the difference between video conferencing and teleconferencing. Now, in this article, I have embedded a little video. You're welcome to sneak over it because I've put this video in one other place. But basically, this is a summary of the difference between video conferencing and teleconferencing. Audio-based versus video-based. Just good information to be aware of so you are competent when it comes to business presentations and modalities. No business presentations and modalities class can be taught without at least addressing podcasting. So although we will not be podcasting in this class, I do want you to at least be very, very familiar with what a podcast is and how to create one. So what I have for you here is EOFire, and this particular blog is the ultimate guide to podcasting. And in this particular article, John DeMoss breaks it down into what is podcasting, the history, smartphone, and most recent tools that can be used as well. Fabulous. Now I want you to make sure that you are very, very familiar with the anatomy of good slides. And SlideShare is a great place to post your slides, but SlideShare has a very specific guide to quality slides within the SlideShare environment. So this is the anatomy of a great SlideShare deck if you plan on posting in SlideShare. Great information. Ignore the standard, know how to enhance text, engage with clickbait, make it exciting to look at, but don't make it too exciting. Know it catches people's attention, and act as though you're speaking to a live audience. Provide follow-ups elsewhere and point them to other SlideShare presentations. Remember, SlideShare is a community. These are example templates that are available via allpptemplates.com. There are literally hundreds of PowerPoint template websites online, including presentationmedia.com. It can go on and on. I place this here not to advertise allpptemplates.com because they're all pretty similar, but just to show you an example of what some great templates really do look like. This week, there's the weekly keyword quiz. The keyword this week is on demand. Remember your discussion this week. Your discussion this week is talking about what role will you play? What do you feel comfortable with? And what role would you feel less and least comfortable playing? Your presentation this week is also on presentation roles. You're going to pick a role, fully explain it, and give some examples. Remember, I'm looking for at least 4 slides. This is your PowerPoint terminology quiz. Now remember, your quiz is based upon the sheet I placed earlier. So we've worked from start to finish through the content. We've talked about the role of the presenter, presentation organization, as well as presentation methods and formats. Are there any questions? You do not need to buy any webinar software. I am supplying the webinar environment. The webinar environment we're using is Confer Zoom. What you're doing is you're simply being aware of the webinar softwares that are out there. So if you decide down the road that this is something you need to invest in, that you are a wise consumer. There are 2 products that we have free of charge that I will be demonstrating for you. Confer Zoom is what we're using now, and Confer Zoom is what you'll be giving your individual presentations in, and there's nothing to buy because I simply I have you share your screen with us. The other product is CCC Confer, which is the selected software of the district. I also have anymeeting.com, which I can give a demo of, but it is not sanctioned by the district because it does not have live feed when it comes to closed captioning. Great question. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but I'll hang out a little bit for anybody who has personal questions. Have a great week.